painted miniature without a decorated base is like a cake without a pickle or a sandwich without frosting, incomplete. Where any decorated base can really tie a paint job together and add more context to your piece. Here's a couple of simple techniques I like to use when basing my minis. Let's get into it. First things first, take a plain base and a little bit of Eileen's tacky glue. Put a nice squiggle on there like you're putting mustard on a hot dog. Then take the brush you're angriest at the moment and spread the glue all the way out to the edge. Once done, take your favorite brand of sour cream, or construction sand, whichever you prefer, and go ahead and give that base a nice dip in the sand. Press it down. To reiterate, squiggle, brush, press. Give that a chance to dry. The next base is going to start out with coffee grounds. Take a scoop of these grounds and mix them in a 1-to-1 ratio with a mixture of Mod Podge and black paint. Mix that up and then smear it onto your base like you smear cream cheese on a bagel. Make sure you leave some crags and crevices because it'll really make everything pop later. Then once everything is dry, give it another coat of Mod Podge and black paint. This is going to act as both a sealant and a base coat. The first paint job is going to start out with Apple Barrel's Burnt Umber, Nutmeg Brown, and Warm Buff. Starting with the Burnt Umber, cover the entire piece with a base coat, making sure not to put too much paint on so you can leave those details sharp. With the Nutmeg Brown, put a little less paint on your brush, and brush gently, leaving that burnt umber to show in the recesses. Lastly, dip the brush in the Warm Buff and brush most of the paint off on a paper towel, a piece of cardboard, or your cat, and lightly hit the raised edges of the sand. This ties everything together, giving the whole piece a three-dimensional look. The next base is going to be the same sand technique with a different paint job. First, coat the top in white paint. This will make the colors pop. Using Admiral Blue, Turquoise, Caribbean, and White, take the Admiral Blue and do the same thing we did with that Burnt Umber. Get in all the cracks and crevices, being careful not to put on too much. Next, use the Turquoise and go over everything except the recesses of the sand. Then, to add a little more depth, mix the Caribbean with a little bit of white before brushing on even more lightly. Then dry brush in white. And now for the coffee base. Take Apple Barrel's Limeade, Eileen's Tacky Glue, and those two paint brushes that made a pass at your wife at last year's Christmas party. Mix a 50-50 ratio of paint and tacky glue before realizing you forgot to paint the first parts first. Those first parts are going to use pewter gray and antique parchment. No matter what, make sure you don't make a poop joke about the paint dropping out of the bottle. Then load the brush up, brush it off, and brush way too much on the base. Tell yourself it'll all be okay when you dry brush it with the antique parchment, knowing that you'll never be able to unsee it. Then soldier on and ruin your YouTube Shorts clip with overactive autofocus. Now for the fun part. Take the limeade and glue mixture and fill all the crags, going over it 2 or 3 times to give it volume and a silky luster that your grandmother could only dream of. And now comes the part where I shamelessly tell you to like and subscribe because the algorithm says you're more likely to do it if I tell you before the outro. These simple techniques are fundamental skills to branch out from, like using different color schemes to simulate grass and hot coals, or adding decorations like grass tufts or flocking. The beautiful thing about this hobby is that the only limits are your imagination and creativity, and money, and time, and space, motivation. At least sand's cheap. Have a good one.
A battle map without terrain is like an unsharpened pencil, in need of some preparation before use. Good terrain features are a staple of the wargame genre, because they add a dynamic and tactical element to your board and give your pretty plastic soldiers something to fight over, plus they look cool. With only a little bit of theft and some elbow grease, we can make these quickly and cheaply. Let's get into it. First, get a chunk of styrofoam, a straight edge, and some sort of blade and cut 3 strips between 3 and 5 inches thick. Once those are broken, grab a square and a pen and cut a 6-inch section out of the strip. Do the same, making a 4-inch and a 2-inch section. After checking the size and shape of the miniature step mountain, take a box cutter and make small 45-degree cuts coming from both directions on the inside edges to create crags. Stack those up one last time and use a miniature to make sure they're the proper size. Repeat this process for as many mountains as you'd like to make. Now glue the steps together. For this process, I prefer hot glue because it's strong and I'm impatient. Just make sure to leave a little space around the edges because we'll be cutting into those later. Remember, these are your step mountains. Make them as big or as tall as you'd like, and just because they aren't your real mountains doesn't mean they haven't always been there for you. Next, take Eileen's tacky glue, the third best chili topping, and that paintbrush that's been giving you the side eye all day. Attempt to be clean and tidy while spreading the glue on the tops of your mountains, knowing that you'll soon give up. Cover the tops of the mountains in sand to give them a really nice texture that will be highlighted later with paint. Now this is the point where I gave up on being tidy. Now finish shaping the two taller pieces by rounding off the corners and cutting crags into the edges. In hindsight, I would recommend doing this before gluing on the sand. The glue and the sand are a pain to cut through and will dull your blade quicker than cutting crew will end a romantic encounter. Now that the glue is dry and the sand is locked down, grab a bottle of Mod Podge that's been mixed with black paint and a newer, prettier paintbrush than you were using before, and give the bottom of each piece a quick single coat of paint. Once dry, cover the rest of the piece in Mod Podge and meditate on how disappointed you were to find out that Chocolate Labs were dogs and not a place you could work. Now onto the painting. With apple barrels pewter gray and white, steal your wife's favorite makeup brush and dip it in the pewter and wipe most of the paint off on a piece of cardboard or paper towel, and cover each piece on the top and sides, letting a little bit of that black from the Mod Podge peek through from the recesses. Lastly, borrow without asking your wife's second favorite makeup brush, dip it in the white paint and take even more off. You really want a dry brush, which is why this technique is called dry brushing. Very lightly tickle the tops and sides of your mountains to highlight all the raised edges in fine detail. Just remember that it is best practice to clean up and hide evidence as you go.
Are those my makeup brushes?
No. Well, looks like I'm going to be sleeping on the couch for a while, so make sure to like and subscribe to help keep me warm at night. There are fewer things more satisfying in this life than turning a piece of styrofoam you got out of your neighbor's garbage into a smaller, well-painted piece of garbage. 3 or 4 sets of these mountains can nearly fill up a battle mat, creating a multi-leveled and dangerous arena any miniature would be happy to throw their life away in. Have a good one.
The road can be a dangerous place. Giant hunks of metal careening towards one another at Mach speed, authoritarian police trying to pull you over simply for breaking the law, or people flying off the handle and screaming at other motorists for every perceived slight or critique of her driving, Mom. No matter what kind of road incident you'd like to recreate for your psychiatrists or jury of your peers, it helps to have a few sections of road as well as an intersection or two. Let's get into it. First, grab a piece of peel and stick corkboard from the dollar store and a piece of chipboard, and do exactly that. Peel and stick. Clean up the edges and repeat this process as necessary. Make sure to save your offcuts as they can be used later to fill your garbage can. If the dollar store is out of cork, you can spend way too much money on the foam back stuff at Walmart and use a heat gun to loosen the glue and peel off the cork. Once done, overlay 2 normal pieces of road in a cross shape to make a crossroad. To fix any chips in your corkboard, find the shiftiest looking pair of clippers in your drawer and go to town. Next, take apple barrels pavement and that paintbrush that's been looking thicker than a bowl of oatmeal and paint those roads in an assortment of creative ways. For example, after getting out my shifty clippers again, I'm going to paint one of these like those lawn mowing videos my dad likes. And then one for my sister, who is 100% chaotic evil. Once that's done, wash up, finish painting your roads, and start the process anew, cutting 2 half pieces to make your set of roads more modular. Next, find the box of cereal your wife bought because she was mad at you, and make a stencil cutting lines that are 1 inch long and 1/4 inch thick, spaced 2 inches apart. Pop those bad boys out and lay the stencil over the middle of the road and lightly brush on apple barrels bright yellow. For any irregular pieces, overlay the stencil halfway over what's been painted already and halfway onto the new piece and continue the pattern. Once done, give everything a second coat. Next, grab the other half of that box of disappointment and make another stencil 1/4 inch wide and about 8 inches long. Align this new stencil with the interior corners and paint a line with apple barrels white to make an intersection. If your handwriting is bad, grab a letter stencil from Walmart and mark out the letters STOP on the right side of each intersection. Next, rip off a piece of the most beloved Nickelodeon character and gently sponge on more pavement paint on top of all of your markings to give it the illusion of wear and tear. Then, act very mature and don't laugh while finding a brush the same width as the tires on your miniature cars to use with apple barrels black to create skid marks on the road. Lastly, infuriate your parents by daring to use the printer and print off a few miniature stop signs. Lightly paint the back black and cut them out. Grab a paintbrush, your shifty clippers, and some toothpicks. Cut the toothpicks about 2 inches long and paint with English ivy green. Then, using a hot glue gun and a lid from a disposable lasagna pan, create bases for the stop signs. Attach the toothpicks to the lasagna bases and sprinkle them with sour cream that's so old that it's turned into construction sand. If you feel so inclined to emulate Fred Durst because it's just one of those days, feel free to break one of your stop signs to give it a little bit of character. After taking a trip to the intersection of like and subscribe and recreating Cormac McCarthy's second best novel, these roads can be a welcome addition to any wargame or tabletop RPG. Whether it be a congested post-apocalyptic highway or a pre-planned ambush of a supply truck or just a simple road rage incident, their utility is limited only by your creativity. Have a good one.
I don't like camping for the same reason I don't like is-was. It's too tense. Wilderness terrain is especially versatile in tabletop RPGs and wargames because it can be used in almost any genre or setting. Using little more than sticks stolen from your favorite Chinese restaurant and a tub of glue snuck out of a classroom like Walter White, these durable papier-mâché structures can be made cheaply and easily. Let's get into it. First, using popsicle sticks, a straight edge, clippers, and a glue gun, take the clippers and cut them into the proper size, about 2.5 inches. Glue the popsicle sticks into 2 equilateral triangles. If you're bad at geometry, these are better known as triangles. Also hope that no one notices how dirty you let your hot glue gun get. Then cut kebab sticks into 3 6-inch sections. Glue the sticks to the corners of the triangles to create a frame for the A-frame tent 10 to 18 front. Next, start a bigger, better tent because I'm not content with what I have. Cut a footprint about 4x6 and chop some chops from that place with the good egg rolls. Glue them upright in the corners of the footprint to build up the scaffold. Once done, throw it away and decide to upgrade. Draw a large circle on a piece of stiff chipboard and do some math magic to create a hexagon. I'm using kebab sticks this time because I can't make up my mind. I once worked with a guy named Kebab, and he was always fond of saying, "My name is Doug." Here, build up the roof of the pavilion-style tent and summon all the necessary will not to hum March of the Gladiators. Chop back to switch sticks. And steal that thing your dad keeps yelling at you for not knowing the name of, and finish gluing everything back together. Buy some cardstock that was supposed to be construction paper and cut out coverings for the tops and sides of each face of the tent, leaving tabs to fold over. Check the fit and cut an inverted T on one face to create an entrance. Do the same with scaffold number B while stewing on the fact that Billy Joel was totally the bad guy and only the good die young. Then continue to stew on the fact that your best cultural hot takes are over 50 years old. Stay in denial about the big tent not being a circus tent and cut 6 isosceles triangles. Those are pizza slices for the geometrically challenged. Make sure to clear your browser history so that no one finds out that you were up till 3 in the morning googling the different types of triangles. Grab the Tupperware from lunch, some water, and glue! Pour the glue and water into the Tupperware and mix to make paper milk shake. Crumple all the paper and dip it into the glue before layering it onto the scaffolds. To reiterate, make sure to use construction paper, not cardstock. If the paper isn't sticking properly, cheat by using a hot glue gun to get it started. To step things up, grab a different colored paper and one of those sewing pizza cutters that your mom said not to use because they're sharper than Kung Lao's hat and you can't be trusted, and cut way more strips than you need. Set up another round of Happy Monocle with glue and water. Dip the strips before layering them over the edges of the tents. Consider a different color scheme so that the tents don't look like grocery bags wrapped in electrical tape. No matter how satisfying this process is, it will always be my second favorite strip dip after honey mustard. Despite the fact that these strips seam in tents, be assured that they are on the outside of the tents. Finally, take Apple Barrel's Pewter Gray and give each tent a dry brush on all sides to make them look faded and worn. The more crumpled the paper and the more gray used will make them look more aged. Then with a lighter gray and a heavier brush, go over everything once more using gentler strokes to highlight the creases in the paper. I prefer to use a light gray rather than white because it has a more natural and less jarring look. More importantly, you can tell people how much more natural and less jarring it looks to sound sophisticated. Lastly, fantastichris.wordpress.com has a fantastic selection of miniature flags spanning cultures and time periods. I will link them in the description. I've chosen this black and white griffin because my printer is out of color ink. Whether it be a bandit hideout, emergency wilderness structure, or Rocky Horror Picture Show, these tents are durable, charming, and campy. The paper and glue are extremely light and exceedingly durable. The possibilities for the application of these techniques are many. Military camps, both past and present, beer tents, wedding pavilions, and yes, even circus tents. The glue is a mess, and I may have gotten kicked out of Bamboo Village for stealing chopsticks, but in the end it was all worth it. Have a good one. The 90-degree wall is a staple of wargames, perfect for obscuring line of sight, adding a gothic flair to the battlefield, and taking up too much space on the shelf. Organizing gaming accoutrements is a genre of video all to itself. But with only a few dollars and some trash pandery, these collapsible walls can fill your table and your shelf. Let's get into it. First, cut a 2-inch by 3-inch rectangle out of a cereal box you bought so you could be more normal. Realize you've already run out of clever one-liners and vamping is hard. Create a grid on the square and use it to draw and cut out the shape of a church window. Buy a piece of foam core from the $1.25 and also now some other prices store and cut out 4 6-inch by 6-inch squares. Peel off the paper. And use the stencil to trace 6 windows on the side of each wall. Draw lightly on the foam because it could leave a bad impression, like when I did my Schwarzenegger at that funeral. Cut out the windows with an X-Acto knife, and if you can't find one, use an approximate knife. Take a moment to throw up out of shame for that terrible joke before redeeming yourself with After balling up a large piece of the world's worst bubblegum, lay out the 4 walls and press the foil into the foam to create a realistic stone texture. If you don't have tinfoil, you can always use a rock or your dry elbows. Grab that box of irregular breakfast cereal and cut a few strips that'll be used to decorate the walls. Crumple up the strips and glue them along the midline and bottom of the walls. For this process, I like Eileen's tacky glue. Sure, she likes her steak well done and wears cheetah print in public, but she's a nice lady. Just be forewarned that no matter how many strips you think you're going to need, you will have to go back and cut more. Grab some kebab sticks and cut them into 4 1-inch sections. I mean half-inch sections. Press them into the sides of the walls with some glue and poke corresponding holes into the other walls to create joints. Cut another strip of foam and 8 small ledges glued halfway up the wall for the platforms to rest on. And now popsicle sticks. Warm up a hot glue gun and glue the popsicle sticks into a platform. Space them out to give them a more ramshackle look. Now to ruin the walls. Rip the walls apart at an angle coming down from the corner. These walls are supposed to look like they've been properly destroyed, like they bombed harder than my Schwarzenegger at that funeral. Then completely cover them in a mixture of Mod Podge and black paint. This will make them stronger and help with the base coat. Once dry, use Apple Barrel's black and a makeup brush that can play a funky baseline and cover the walls completely in a thin layer of paint. Make sure to apply the paint thinly so that the details show through. Get the windowsills and all the crevices. Let dry again and use Apple Barrel's pewter gray to give everything a highlight by dipping the brush and wiping most of the paint off on the carpet or a piece of cardboard. Brush lightly over all surfaces. Then use Apple Barrel's white and repeat the process using less paint and lighter strokes. For some added flair, painstakingly format an assortment of tiny posters so that you have an excuse to tag your favorite movie in the description. Glue them to the walls while avoiding the temptation of making the rookie mistake of gluing them slightly off kilter. It never ends well. For enough added flair to make the manager at Tchotchkes happy, mix Apple Barrel's Barn and Bright Red and use a stiff brush to flick paint all over the walls. Lastly, grab the platforms from earlier and use a watered-down mixture of Apple Barrel's burnt lumber to saturate everything that's left. These walls are a quick and easy way to fill a table for Dungeons & Dragons, Warhammer, or any other miniatures game. They store easily and can be taken from place to place, and if you're feeling fancy, magnets can be used in place of kebab sticks. Have a good one. Isn't this where?
Don't take offense, your battlefield is looking a little sparse. The sci-fi world isn't all puppy dogs and rainbows, and the bad guys need to be kept at bay. With little more than some dollar store foam, grandma's favorite cheat code, and a slight amount of damage to the old nicotine receptors, these Chainlink Fences can be made quickly and with minimal cost. Let's get into it. First things first, grab a piece of dollar store foam board and cut as many 2" by 4" rectangles as fences needed. Cut the corner off of each rectangle to make fat hexagons so that the center line is 4 inches across and the sides are 2 inches. This will give the base the ability to create a right angle. Peel the paper off of one side of each base like a banana. Next, use a file, emery board, or dried shark skin to taper the edges of each base. Then cut a line down the middle of each base, making sure not to cut all the way through. On an unrelated note, top-sliced hot dog buns are terrible, and reason number 258 not to visit New England behind the silly accents and their odd affinity for eating sea scorpions. Grab some cross-stitching mesh and some matte black spray primer. Take this as your weekly opportunity to go outside and coat the mesh on both sides. Cut the mesh diagonally across the squares into, once again, 2" by 4" rectangles. Just for reference, this stuff is referred to as granny grading and is a fantastic material to have on hand to either make stuff or distract your grandma when you've run out of Werther's Originals. Grab the glue gun you still haven't cleaned and glue the granny grading into the slice you made earlier and close the base around it to seal everything in. Take the kebab sticks from dinner and coat them in Apple Barrel's black paint before setting them aside to dry. Find the halfway point between milk and cheese and some cheap glue. Mix it with water before realizing someone filled your sour cream with construction sand and cover the base of each fence in both. Hope no one will notice that you almost skipped this step and prematurely painted one of these bases. Once dry, take the tried and true mixture of Mod Podge and black paint and cover all of the bases. Make sure not to lay it on too thick like my quote-unquote humor to retain the detail of the sand. Now to let you play the part of Biz Marquee because I got what you need. Oh baby, glue the post to the thing. And you say it's just a fence. And you say it's just a fence. Okay, I'm done. Using a mixture of apple barrel's burnt umber and water, cover each base once again. Then dry brush with apple barrel's light mocha. Do this by dipping the brush and wiping most of the paint off and brushing the base lightly to highlight the raised details. Now it's Tom Sawyer time. With Folk Art's Gunmetal Gray, brush all the metal parts of the fence. The black base coat helps the silver color to stand out and apply even coverage. For a little variation in color, use Folk Art's Antique Copper and brush random spots to give the fence an old and rusted look. Then find a brush that snuck its way on set and an excessive amount of jelly beans and some sprinkles. Mix up some more glue. Open up the clump foliage and the painted sawdust. Sparsely brush the base with glue and sprinkle on the fake grass. For the clump foliage, use a thicker and heavier glue. The foliage is just a car sponge that's been torn up and dyed with green paint. Lastly, if there's no reasonable adult around to tell you no, use a hot soldering iron or wood-burning tool to melt holes in the fence. Only do this in a well-ventilated area and wear a mask because those fumes are slightly less gross than the springtime air in San Francisco. I hope when I said your battlefield was sparse, you didn't get defensive. These little fences are quick and easy to make, whereas granny grading is extremely versatile and affordable and is a staple when it comes to creating DIY terrain. Fences can fit into any modern sci-fi or post-apocalyptic setting and can do wonders to fill a battlefield, whether it be blocking movement, obscuring line of sight, or just providing aesthetic flavor. Have a good one. Doing things yourself is hard. Scheduling dentist appointments, writing scripts for YouTube videos, and rolling your own dice. These shiny, horrible, click-clack math rocks sneer and taunt while continuously landing on the wrong side like a piece of peanut butter toast, starting off as a well-balanced breakfast promising sustenance and deliciousness and transforming in an instance of carelessness into an inappropriately balanced mess of heartbreak and disappointment, proving that once again, doing things yourself is hard.
Let's get into it.
This first dice tower is going to be made from popsicle sticks and hot glue. Luckily, due to the way it's constructed, I don't need to clip the ends of the popsicle sticks. But I'm gonna. First, make a wall about 4.5 inches long.
Reloading.
And as tall as the sticks will allow. Glue another stick long ways across the top and bottom to hold the wall together. Make 2 side walls the same way, making it 2 or 3 sticks wide. Also, be sure to make one side wall about 1.5 inches shorter than the other. I forgot this step due to a breakfast-related tragedy earlier in the day. Glue the side walls to the back panel standing up at a right angle. For this, I'm using a ruler and a square. Next, make the inner ramps. These should be the same width as the outside walls and roughly 3 inches long. Notice the aforementioned mistake while I shorten one of the side walls to make a doggy door for the dice. Glue the 3 inner ramps into the tower at a downward angle in alternating directions using a dice to check the fit. Then, for totally artistic reasons and not because I ran out of popsicle sticks, leave the last wall partially open and glue the whole thing shut. If you are so inclined, make a catch by gluing 3 sticks into a rectangle and gluing the open side to the bottom of the door. If you are so inclined to flex on people that are easily impressed, make the catch telescopic by making little wooden brackets for it to sit in like pant loops and sand everything down so it slides easily.
The next tower is going to be made the same basic way using the lid of a disposable cake pan that you bought and left out as a subtle reminder to your wife that there is not only the breakfast I dropped still on the floor, but also no dessert in the fridge. Cut the large flat top out of the lid and make sure to keep the rest as it can be thrown away later. Just make sure to go slow when gluing because the tip of the hot glue gun can warp the plastic. Also make sure to weigh down the bottom of the tower with a little extra glue so that it doesn't tip over.
Reloading.
All in all, this tower took about 3 lids to make. The last tower is going to be made primarily out of pink insulation foam sourced from that new construction down the street, and a Pringles can sourced from a lunchbox from that new construction down the street. Painstakingly cut out about 120 1-inch by 1/2-inch by 1/2-inch bricks and throw them 30 to 50 at a time into a coffee can filled with rocks and shake them for about 2 minutes. Brick smoke. Don't breathe this. Then take the chip can and mark out 3 circles. Cut out the circles, pretending that the sound of box cutter on foam isn't just as bad as making chewing gum out of toothpaste and tang. After trying to get that sound out of your ears with a toothpick, use a metal file to grind down the circles so that they fit into the can. Cut an exit door on the Pringles can 1 inch wide and 2 inches tall. Then cut out a 90-degree chunk of one of the 3 circles. File down one side and cut a slice off of the chunk to help funnel the dice out of the exit. Cut the other 2 circles in half and file down half of one side before gluing it into a spiral shape using the can to straighten out the spiral. Make sure to file down the last semicircle at an angle to make sure the dice don't get stuck at the top of the ramp. Then coat the can and steps in a mixture of Mod Podge and black paint and set aside to dry. Now back to the bricks. Glue each brick to the side of the Pringles can in an alternating pattern until up to the top, using a half brick when necessary to frame the door.
Reloading.
Once to the top, glue another brick jutting outwards where each brick meets. This will give the tower that classic rook shape. Fill the spaces in between with even more bricks and add one more top level to create crenellations. Then using the Mod Podge and paint mixture again, coat the whole piece and let dry. Once done, cover with a base coat of Apple Barrel's pewter gray, leaving the recesses dark and not forgetting the stairs. Highlight with a dry brush of Apple Barrel's granite gray, hitting just the raised edges. Lastly, glue the innards in place, making sure to line up the ramp with the exit. Give everything a test drive and attempt to farm engagement by asking people to comment which tower is their favorite. Doing things yourself is hard, but necessity is the mother of invention and difficult problems require innovative solutions. Don't want to make a dentist appointment? Don't go to the dentist. Dropped your breakfast on the floor? Get married and have your wife clean it up. Don't want to roll your own dice? Spend 2 hours making a contraption that you already have to drop the dice into, effectively rolling them yourself. Like most kitchen gadgets, these towers take up space and only solve one hyper-specific problem, helping that person who can't keep their dice on the table, who will remain nameless and is also named Dylan. Have a good one.
Shipping containers are great for wargames. They're big and blocky and can obscure line of sight and break up the battlefield into multiple areas like a Kit Kat. They're modular and stackable, allowing them to create a multi-tiered fighting arena. And they are quick and easy to make in little or no time at all, so you can realize you've made far too many and wonder, where am I going to put all these? Let's get into it. First things first, find some corrugated cardboard. This can be kind of hard to find, but I use inserts from pan pizza boxes at Domino's. Cut the cardboard into 2-inch by 4-inch rectangles so that the corrugates are going long ways, or short ways, so that the waves are shorter. Cut 3 rectangles per shipping container and 2 2-inch end caps. I prefer a crafty cutter and a pair of scissors. Once those are cut, cover them in a mixture of Mod Podge and black paint. This will provide a base coat and reinforce the paper, making it much stronger. These pizza box inserts aren't normally used for craft supplies. They're normally used for trying to corral a greasy mess, so they should feel right at home working with me.
While those dry, cut a copy of each piece out of light chipboard or cereal box to use as backings. This will add even more desperately needed rigidity because on a strength scale, these squiggly pizza squares fall somewhere between dream punches and 1/52nd of a year. Then cut 1-inch strips out of the aforementioned chipboard. Each container will need 4 4-inch strips and 8 2-inch strips. Draw a dotted line down the middle for later. Make sure to make more than you think you'll need, because I had to go back and cut more 3 times. Once cut, score the strips by running the dull side of your blade along the dotted line from earlier. This will make the strips easier to fold in half. When folding, make sure the score is on the outside and fold the strips into a right angle. Now grab a glue gun and the squigglies from earlier and glue on their respective backings. You could use regular school glue for this, but ain't nobody got time for that. Now that the sides are looking thick with 2 C's, glue them together at a right angle and glue the ends in so that the humps are vertical. With the strips from earlier, cut them to size and glue them over all the angles, starting with the long sides, then the short vertical sides, and then the short horizontal sides. The order doesn't change the structure of the piece, but I think it looks the best. Notice that similar to Tim Allen's neighbor, these shipping containers don't have a bottom. This is because they're kind of unnecessary and will cut off the opportunity for a little more storage. And in the world of wargaming, storage is rarer than good hygiene and proper table manners. Now repeat this process as necessary while thinking about how there are probably shipping containers out there with toy ships and toy shipping containers that don't scale together. Now cover everything in another layer of Mod Podge. It's much easier to cover the wavy pizza inserts before gluing on the strips rather than trying to get up into the nooks and crannies like you just turned 40 and made that extra special doctor's appointment. Once dry, cover the first container in English Ivy Green. All the paints I'll be using will be Apple Barrel, unless I'm lying. Set that aside to dry and get a new brush and cover the second container in Admiral Blue while pretending that it didn't take me 14 takes not to say Admirable Blue. Next, use a bottle of Barn Red that may or may not have a clog in it. It did. Lastly, use Pavin for a nice dull black. Next, use Limeade mixed with English Ivy to highlight the green container. Use Aquamarine with that blue that you secretly look up to. Granite Gray works perfectly well with the pavement. And Diva Pink will make the Barn Red look fabulous. Now grab a stencil that was 2 aisles over from the paint and use Apple Barrel's white to paint on your letters. This is best done by overlaying the stencil and gently stippling with a paintbrush with long and soft bristles. Lastly, realize that I can't be trusted and use Folk Art's Gunmetal Gray, Antique Copper, and that sponge you hid so that you had an excuse not to do the dishes, and dab both colors gently on to give the containers a used and rusty look. Shipping containers are great for wargames, fitting into almost any setting with ease, from shipyards, dockyards, junkyards, front yards, backyards, and even the occasional birthday card. These containers are easy to make and effectively free, excluding a small fortune in hot glue. Have a good one.
I don't like sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating and it gets everywhere. And in desert wargaming, there are thankfully few opportunities to roll for related chafing in those intimate areas. Inversely, however, there are thankfully many ways to make desert-related terrain, starting with a simple desert house made of little more than dollar store foam board and spackle. Let's get into it. First things first, get a piece of foam board from that store where nothing costs $1 and cut 4 walls roughly 3 inches tall for every building. I'm making mine 4 inches by 4 inches and 4 inches by 6. Once done, peel off the paper on both sides, making sure to save the paper as a reminder that you haven't cleaned up yet. Cut a door or two for each building roughly an inch wide and an inch and a half tall, and somewhere between 2 and 14 windows an inch tall and 3/4 of an inch wide. Use the first wall as a template to maintain consistency of height and size, which coincidentally is why they started putting the tag on the front right inside of your jeans. Okay, now that your pants are zipped back up, use a pencil to emboss a brick pattern into random parts of the styrofoam. This will show under the chips of plaster, and that's a heck of a lot better than what's lying under my chips because all that's lying under there is an empty plate and a pile of regret. Once done, imprint a rock-like texture onto your bricks by pressing into them with a piece of rolled up tinfoil, a rock, or your face if you're bent brim. Then cover the inside walls with a mixture of Mod Podge and black paint. This will stiffen everything up and keep the insides from looking unfinished, despite being unfinished. While that dries, find a piece of cross-stitching mesh that you spray painted black and cut diagonal squares to go over the windows of the buildings. Step up the look of the mesh and give yourself a hand cramp. Cut out the cross sections to increase the size of the squares. This will make the windows look more homey and less like a prison cell. Then, using offcuts of foam board, cut out 2 ledges per wall that will hold up the ceiling later. Grab a glue gun that makes you look like you're compensating and glue the ledges to the inside walls so that the top is level with the top of the windows. Then glue the cross-stitching mesh to the windows on the inside. Once done, glue the walls together. Don't worry about hiding the seams because they'll be covered up later. Just focus on not getting burnt by the hot glue gun because the glue comes out like a mixture of napalm and lava and my fingers still haven't healed up yet. Then get the foam board out one last time and cut out the roofs like you're Steven Spielberg directing a group of loud Rottweilers. Find some spackle and a single chopstick because the Chinese place had a half-off special, and before trying to figure out whether or not that joke made sense, grab a glove and smear the spackle onto the outside of the buildings like you're smearing toothpaste onto a nail hole because you couldn't find your spackle. Take a moment to hear my dad having a rage-induced heart attack before telling the 3 people watching this to never fill nail holes with toothpaste because it doesn't blend in and leaves a gross and greasy residue. Now it's time to paint. First, another visit of that tasty mixture of Mod Podge and black paint. Cover the entire outside of the buildings, both spackle and foam. Then use Apple Barrel's Burnt Umber to cover the spackle and windows, leaving the brick parts for later. Once later becomes now, paint all the brick bits with Apple Barrel's Barn Red. Quickly dry brush the spackle with light mocha before your wife sees the paint and demands that you go and get her a coffee. Accent the windows with pewter gray. Use granite gray on the bricks if you're feeling fancy. And lastly, go over the entire piece once more using aged parchment. If you can find them, desert houses can be dangerous. Usually there's a mean witch inside looking to fatten you up, and despite the fact that I've already beaten her to the punch and don't quite understand heterophones, these particular desert houses can be made for less than $1 a piece and look almost good enough to eat. Have a good one. After spending an afternoon neglecting my responsibilities and making terrain, there are 2 things I always end up doing. Trying to find a place to put all the stuff I just made, and getting ready for a game. However, without a battle mat, my options are either use a bare table or get my friend Matt to lay down on our playing surface like we're eating at one of those creepy sushi restaurants. Luckily, with little more than a canvas drop cloth and some spray paint that I mistook for deodorant, multiple lightweight and compact battle mats can be made cheaply and easily. Let's get into it. First things first, find a canvas drop cloth from a store that sells things. 6x9 is a good size because after being cut in half in the hamburger style, it'll be big enough to accommodate most wargames. For each battle mat, use 3 or 4 colors of spray paint matching the preferred color scheme. Bring the mat outside and lay it over top a pile of cardboard and lightly spray the canvas. For a desert motif, layer dark brown, light brown, and a small amount of red. Use the color of the canvas as a de facto 4th color. Let each side dry for a few hours or preferably overnight, and use black, white, and gray for a stone or pavement style. First spray with the black and white in random spots and then lightly cover with the gray, letting the darker and lighter spots show through.
Then for the grassland, use a yellow green, dark green, and brown before going over the whole thing lightly with a foresty green. Just build up those layers while you're trying to explain to your neighbors that your green armpits are due to a deodorant-related mishap and not a medical condition. Once dry, throw the canvases into the dryer with a damp rag to loosen up those creases like you're trying to chill out the bad guy from the Karate Kid. While that dries, cut some squares out of foam and round off the corners to create mounds that can be placed under the mat to add dynamic hills to the grasslands and help you throw down dunes like your Frank Herbert. Start by hacking off the edges with a box cutter and then finish rounding it down with a file or some rough sandpaper. Take the canvases out of the dryer and bring them back to the table. Find the washcloth as it's no longer needed and spread the canvas on the floor to be rolled up. Roll these up on a 50-inch poster tube or a piece of PVC pipe to avoid fold lines. Finally, set up that game you've been itching for. I'm getting ready for a game of Space Weirdos, a fantastic 2021 skirmish game from Garsky Games. If you'd like to check it out, I've left the link in the description. I'm putting the hills under the mat, but ultimately I'm going to remove them because this is going to be an assault on a desert village. I've always had a problem setting up a battlefield. My instincts always drive me to make it symmetrical, and while it's the most fair from a gameplay perspective, it's visually and thematically uninteresting. I usually solve this problem by setting up the table and letting my instincts take over, then playing around and moving stuff until the battlefield starts to tell a story, or more likely I throw my hands up in frustration and say to heck with it, and then move on to the outro. Like a good rug, the proper mat can really tie a battlefield together, providing the literal groundwork for the fight at hand. Canvas drop cloths are cheap, friendship is priceless, and spray paint is free if you have neighbors that don't close the garage doors. Still, despite the fact that my friend Matt gets to play more games, I feel as though our friendship has lost a step now that he is no longer gracing my table as though he were trying to get me to paint him like one of my French girls. Have a good one.